Hello, and welcome back to the third devlog of my Titanic game project, which finally has a name. Titanic Echoes from the Deep. I finally got around to making a title, after a year or so on working on this thing. Titanic EFD for short is a choose-your-own adventure-style game that takes place on and around the story of the Titanic. Follow the whole story of the ship through multiple characters' eyes. Will you be a hero, or will you do anything to protect yourself and your family? Before we begin though, I would like to really thank everyone for the support I've been getting, and I would also like to welcome all new viewers. If this is something that sounds interesting to you, I would really appreciate if you would subscribe and like the video. It really helps me out a lot. We also got a Discord that is growing quickly. Link in the description below. Okay, so it's been a while, and I'm sorry about that. I've been sick for quite a long time now, but I finally got around to making this devlog. The past months, I've been working mostly on recreating Southampton Harbour like it was in 1912. This is where most of the characters boarded the ship, and it's also the last time Titanic was docked to the mainland. This is where the maiden voyage began. I have really big plans for this area, so I really want to make this look and feel realistic. But I also need to make it playable and explorable for the character. So the first question is, how do I recreate a poorly documented area which is over 100 years old? First of all, we need reference images. And yeah, trust me, this process was such a bitch to map out. All different periods, angles, different buildings, just... It really seems like Southampton decided to rebuild their harbour every other year. Before I move further though, I really have to shout out Titanic Honor and Glory for helping me out with this area. I really learned that if you need help, don't be afraid to ask. Titanic Honor and Glory is another Titanic-based project, which is turning out amazing. Really, go check them out, link is in the description. They gave me a freaking map of the area in 1912, which quickly became the base of my environment. And now I had the map to support it, I could really start to block out my environment. I started out by blocking out the ground and the passenger sheds. These sheds are where the higher class passengers went on board in the ship. Earlier this year, I made this rail structure thing, which will lead the passengers to their decks, so I just threw it into the scene. I do see now, however, that this was way off in scale, so this needs to be recreated more accurately. Next I began building the platform that goes along the side of the shed. A lot of the references here were also from different periods, so I had to use some creative liberty to make it all fit together. The shed in itself is something I go back and forth with, as I'm never really pleased with the results, but I exported my block out and put it into 3ds Max to get the dimensions right when I was modeling it. After the main body was built, I placed some cubes at areas I wanted to cut out. In 3ds Max this is called a boolean, which basically can take multiple meshes and subtract that shape from another mesh. I have these modular construction objects which I wanted to use to make the metal supports inside the shed. These models were actually made for the gantry, which is a huge metal construction used when building the ship in Belfast. But I figured out I could use these models as the design seemed very similar. I've actually used a method here I've never done before, to construct one big mesh from a bunch of smaller meshes inside of Unreal Engine, because usually I would have to go to an external modeling software to do this. But I'm no building engineer, so the supports there are probably not realistic, but it's only going to be seen from afar, so it's more than enough. And I was really happy with the results here. I was tired of looking at everything in Unreal's base material, so I decided to texture the shed and the platforms. I'll start out with the platforms, texturing them in Substance Designer. The shed itself has a yellowish metal paneling applied to it, and since the model is so big, I needed to texture it using a different method. If I just apply a panel material to this, you can really see the tiling on the model. There's a bunch of ways to fix this, but I'm going to use an amazing asset I bought which solves this problem. Xtile is a parent material which lets you split images into segments and then randomly place these segments around on the model with different variations. This method is somewhat costly for performance, so I need to be careful not to overuse it, but for just this model, this should be fine. And when all of this is done, I do like I always do, parkour. I also laid the foundation for the wooded area between the ship and the sheds. There's also some tracks there that we use to move the cranes, coal, and these passenger platforms. And the edge we can see here is made of concrete bricks, but as you can see, it looks really repetitive because of the material. So I wanted to experiment with how I could break up the texture and make it look more natural. I had a really good reference image for once, which really shows how it looked, so I tried to recreate it. I like this, and it really does help with the tiling issue, so now we just have to do that like 1,000 more times. So there's a pretty big jump here. I may or may not have forgotten to record this. But essentially I used the map provided by THG and my reference images to lay out all the train tracks. I used landscape splines here, which lets me model along a line which can curve and rotate based on the ground. I also made a landscape with a basic landscape material so I can paint out where the different ground materials would be used. My landscape here is also set up to support virtual textures, which is an advanced tool that can really help you out a lot. But I'm using it mostly to blend between different objects to the landscape. As you can see here, we got two 3D models. The model on the left has a basic material, and the one on the right has virtual textures enabled. and I'm sure you can see the difference and why this is an insane upgrade. And I really wanted the train tracks here to look realistic, so I used the information from the splines to apply a rocky pebble texture under the tracks. And after this, I put some rocks into Unreal's foliage tool, which lets me sort of procedurally paint with 3D models. And these rocks also have virtual textures, which is why they blend so well. Along the train tracks, I also place some track switches, which is a lever that pulls the rails to change the direction they're going. And I was really happy with the results of these train tracks so far. The area I'm currently focused on has two main elements to it. The outside here, which is a basic rocky ground, and this part, which is more concrete road-like. Based on the reference images, we can see that the road here seems to be somewhat elevated, but tends to dip into the ground in some areas as well. So based on the map reference, I started to roughly map out where the edges of the road would be. Once these edges were finished, I exported them out of Unreal and I opened them up in 3ds Max. Here I used the edges as a reference so I could draw out the proportions of the road itself. After some work and a lot of adjustments, I ended up with this. For now, the whole road is elevated, but I do edit this eventually using Unreal's modeling tools. I dabble a lot back and forth with what kind of textures I wanted on this road. Me and my chat figured out that this was probably a mix between rough concrete and rocks. So I tried blending 3 different materials together, which made this result, which is something I liked and I kept it for a while. The thing is, even though this might be historically accurate, I don't like it. It's all just too plain and boring. I tried so many different textures, but the contrast between the road and the ground was just too uninteresting. For now, I changed this cobblestone texture and I blended it with some rocky concrete, which in my opinion breaks up the visuals a lot better. I also added some rubble along the ground as I imagined this area being quite messy. Though I will probably clean this up a bit, as I do think they would have cleaned up this area for the maiden voyage of such a luxurious ship. Another small thing I did was the building right here. I'm not too sure what kind of building it is, but the size and position was necessary for me to map out the area properly. To be clear, I did not make this building accurate to the images. I just threw on some brick walls, roofs, doors and windows that could be seen as a similar building. I need to research this building further before I sit down and accurately make it. Plus, it was nice to just have some new elements to the scene. I got to test out a lot of Unreal modeling tools on this small building though, so I did learn a couple of new methods for editing existing models. And around the building I added some grass, and a bit further down a small patch of trees to break up the environment and make it look more interesting. Another surprise was randomly delivered by THG during one of my streams. I was sent this mystical file that later revealed itself to be one of THG's old models of the boat train locomotive that was used to transport the passengers from around England to Southampton harbour. I haven't gotten so far in development where I actually started on the train sequence I'm planning, but this model will definitely help out once I get there. I also did a quick retexture of it, as the textures provided were somewhat lacking, but I didn't expect anything else to be honest. And inside the passenger shed, I made this small platform where the passengers would step off the train. Once again, a huge thank you to Titanic Honor and Glory for their assistance and information. I also added the plugin Cesium in the background, which lets you essentially stream the entire world into your game. And I put the coordinates of today's Southampton harbor, and I cut out a piece in the middle so I can blend the areas together. But this is just something I added to have a horizon. This area is all still just work in progress, as you can probably tell. But for the time being and the time spent, I really got my hopes up and the vision for this environment in the future. I was actually planning on finishing this whole environment before I made a devlog about it, but it really takes a lot of time to research, build and create environments like this. If I wouldn't release another devlog before the environment's completion, you would not see me for months. And I really want to get more content out there on YouTube, as I really enjoy the YouTube thing right now. And on the notes of YouTube content, I recently started to work on this side project. It now has the working title of Tapes, which is a horror anthology found footage game. That's really a mouthful. It's inspired by movies like Paranormal Activity and other found footage films. I will make a video about this project later, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I just wanted to tell you guys. But don't worry, Titanic is still my main project and it will be continuously worked on, but the project is just so big and there's so much to be done, and there's so many new things that I need to learn before implementing them into the game. I've said in earlier devlogs that I would be doing other side projects for a break from Titanic, but also to learn new stuff. And this side project, Tapes, is going to be the project where I try out mechanics and things that I need to learn for EFD. And it also makes me branch out my YouTube content as a game designer and not just a Titanic YouTuber. If I were to only post Titanic devlogs on my YouTube channel, there would barely be a video per month. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Drop a like or comment down below what you think. Hey, maybe even subscribe. Again, thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!